Donald Trump, as we're following today throughout the show, is hosting European leaders in the White House, and specifically Zelensky, on the issue of Russia's invasion of Ukraine after his disastrous summit with Putin. And I want to play for you a hot mic that caught something that should freak you out. It should freak all of us out. It is insane. And just before playing this, in this segment, I'm going to bring back on Caolan Robertson, who's a journalist in Ukraine covering this exact subject, who's going to give his take. And he shares in the interview from a source that he has that I can't share. It's Putin. No. But a source that shared with him something I hadn't heard yet about something that happened in the meeting and why they didn't have their lunch in. And so we'll get into all of that. Do stick around for it. First, here's Trump on a hot mic saying the most delusional thing ever.
Yeah, I think so. Set up a trilat, you know. So and where do you want to do? I think he wants to make a deal. I think he wants to make a deal for me. You understand that? As crazy as it sounds. Just sit down. Sit down, everybody. Okay. I think we'll let the press come in for a minute.
So it's him saying, "Sit down, everybody." Really think about no. Of course, it's not that. If you couldn't hear, he said, quote, "I think he wants to make a deal for me. Do you understand?" As crazy as it sounds. I don't know who, maybe he's talking to. I can't see, actually. I don't know who he's talking to. But think about that wording. I think he wants to make a deal for me. And this we do talk about with Caolan. The core of Trump's misunderstanding, which is that he has a friendship with Putin. He doesn't understand what's going on. He doesn't understand what Putin's intending here, to the point where he would think that Putin, one thing he repeats a lot is, I think he wants to make a deal. He obviously doesn't by all of his actions all the times, but that's not even the part that I'm talking about. It's him thinking that for him, because of their friendship, I think he wants to make a deal for me. That Putin would make a lasting peace deal after all Putin has done to manipulate Trump, to manipulate American politics, to manipulate world leaders at large for this imperialist ambition. And for Trump to see all of that history and the aggression and Putin's further aggression, and then his handling of the meeting, Lavrov coming in with the USSR, further ambitions, type indicating shirt, for Putin to give him nothing meaning, and to think he wants to make a deal for me because we're friends. That sums up why Trump cannot handle this correctly. And it's freaky. It's really, really freaky. Just once, this is a heavy subject, then we'll get into the meaningful stuff. Here is Trump not realizing that the president of Finland is sitting right in front of him.
President Stubb of Finland, and he's somebody that, where are we here? Where?
I'm right here.
Oh. You look better than I've ever seen you look. But you've done a great job, and we wanted to have you.
Has he done a great? Do you know? You don't even know what he looks like. Look, this is where he was sitting. He's looking right at him. He goes, "Where is he? President Stubb." Right there. So that's just another, just to kind of alleviate the stress for a second there. Now about a discussion with Caolan Robertson. And I'm joined now by the wonderful Caolan Robertson, who, of course, we had on a couple times, is a journalist based in Ukraine, right now elsewhere, but heading back soon. Caolan, how have you been? My goodness.
I've been good. I've just been spending the last few days in Estonia because they're building new trenches all over the place here because Russia wants this country next if they take Ukraine. So I've been interviewing soldiers, British military, French and American Marines, all testing out their tanks here in the forests, preparing for the worst case scenario. So it's been really, really dramatic, but then a really politically dramatic day as well in the US. So
well, let's get right into that. We have so much to talk about. Let's go back first. The Putin-Trump summit happened. I've given my thoughts. Yikes. Tell me, as someone who's engaging more frequently with Ukrainians, yourself living there, what was the general sense of Putin landing in the United States on U.S. soil, despite Trump multiple times calling it Russia, and walking out on a red carpet, Trump afterwards, despite getting seemingly nothing, being super complimentary? What was your fellow people based in Ukraine's take on that?
People in Ukraine were disgusted by it. There didn't need to be a red carpet, and it wasn't even a red carpet. There was a lunch that was organized that referred to Vladimir Putin as His Excellency. And it was, fine dining while Sumy was being bombed, while cities in Ukraine were being bombed. And it was completely unnecessary. And Ukrainians love America. In 2014, when they did the Maidan Revolution, the Revolution of Dignity, they looked west, they waved American flags because they see America as the beacon of rule of law and democracy. And so to see a war criminal responsible for basically millions of deaths of all of his neighbors walk off a plane with a red carpet, wave to Donald Trump was deeply disturbing for so many Ukrainians that I was speaking to. And this is also why the conversation went nowhere between him and Trump. I mean, he looked pretty annoyed. Trump looked annoyed at Putin, and Putin looked kind of confused the whole time, because you can't negotiate with terrorists. I mean, this used to be America's foreign policy. This used to be how America did their business. And it was the opposite of everything they put out in the past. And it was so disturbing. It was so disturbing. And within 24 hours of Putin getting off that plane, Ukraine was being hit by missiles and drones. Multiple people were killed, and ballistic missiles were hitting Kyiv. And he was on US soil, and it sends a message to the rest of the world that if you're a dictator, if you're an autocrat, if you're someone that commits war crimes on a daily basis, you can have brunch in Alaska. You can have brunch with the president of America, like everything's okay. So it was extremely disturbing and pointless. And everyone was always asking, who won out of that conversation? Who benefited the most? And it was Vladimir Putin, because what Putin wants the most of anything else is legitimacy. That's why he's always doing these ridiculous photo ops, him, topless on a horse, him with every single world leader he possibly can. He wants legitimacy because he knows he's an illegitimate leader. He's not popular in Russia. And he got that by landing in America, and he got it the second that the plane wheels touched on the ground. So that's why it was so depressing for people in Ukraine, watching basically the free world host a war criminal. And I've been the journalists that I've been speaking to that were present at the time have said that something went down behind the scenes there that was quite unpleasant, and we don't really know exactly what that is yet. That's why the lunch was cancelled. Something weird happened. But
like between Putin and Trump is the speculation?
From what I've heard, it was between a member of Putin's entourage and Trump's entourage, some sort of very odd kind of blackmail compliment, something really unpleasant that happened that basically the whole thing was cancelled. Something very unusual. We will find out what it is in the next few days, but really, really, really disturbing. But that's because we are applying, Western liberal logic to a Soviet mindset, to something like Russia. Russia is so different to America in the way that it thinks, in the way that it strategizes, in the way that it looks at war. And thinking that you can negotiate with a country with imperialist desires like Russia is pointless. And thinking that you can sit down and have a conversation like it's a real estate deal is a waste of time. The only reason Trump got on that plane, the only reason Putin, Freudian slip, got on that plane is because he wanted the legitimacy. That's what he got. So,
I mean, you mentioned the Soviet. Sorry, what did you say there? You cut out?
I was just saying it was a disaster.
Oh, yeah. While you continue to watch this discussion, please, if you appreciate this channel, click the subscribe button. It's free, but it supports us algorithmically. And then check out Caolan's channel, Caolan Reports, on YouTube. Back to the interview. You mentioned the Soviet mindset. You saw, what was it? It was Lavrov, right? Show up with the CCCP shirt on, I guess, USSR. Seemingly obviously mocking the meeting itself. And then to hear, I hadn't heard that before, that something weird went on behind the scenes, maybe about one of Trump's cabinet officials, and just this utter disdain and disrespect towards, of course, the concept of peace, but also because Trump cares a lot about people respecting him and Zelensky, don't talk back to me, whatever. To be disrespected in numerous ways, the strikes happening as the meeting was going on and the build up to it, that shirt, wink, wink moment, and then maybe what happened behind the scenes. So then what was so baffling was to see Trump come out, and he had previously started talking kind of tough, like, hey, if this doesn't go well, if he doesn't agree to what I want him to, I'm going to storm out of the meeting. I'm going to leave early, which the lunch thing was canceled, but that felt like a little bit because the meeting went so long, and Trump comes out after and just heaps praise on Putin. So last time we talked, you were saying that Trump's shift to tougher talk and him saying, now we're by 10 days, 50 days, we're going to put the pressure on, I swear. This time we went through on the show the timeline of how many times he said we're going to finally lean into pressure on Russia, and then the deadlines constantly lapse. And you were saying, yeah, he is souring on Putin, but it's not because he actually is seeing who's to blame here, what's going to stop it, and the levers he's going to have to pull, or having some authentic shift in feelings towards Ukraine in a positive direction, but just that he felt slighted that his bestie maybe wasn't his bestie. And so then all it took was for Putin to meet with him, and then he's like, okay, my friend's here again. Whatever happened behind the scenes, nothing was accomplished, and still he's again swung all the way back to a really positive. Putin definitely wants peace. I have a great relationship with him. And do you see that shift? I know this is going to be probably a pretty simple answer, but in Trump's tone about Putin as any like real observation of a difference in Putin's ambitions here?
Yeah, well, you can see it in Trump's body language before and after the meeting with Putin. He genuinely thought, you know what, all of the stuff in the past, all of these phone calls, no matter what's happened, if I just sit down with my old friend, like in the good old days, we could just hash it out. And he realized that that's impossible and it's not going to work because Putin is totally uninterested in Trump. These are people that were trained by the KGB and are only interested again in imperialist empires. And Trump looked exhausted and exasperated with it. And I think that's why he invited Zelensky to come a few days later and why he has more time for this. And I think he's getting more and more exhausted with it. That doesn't mean that he cares about Ukraine. That doesn't mean that he even knows what the Donbas is. But I think he's just wanting to wash his hands of most of it. He's just like, I am done with this entire thing. I made these campaign promises to my voters that I'd end this in 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever it was. And I'm just annoyed that I can't fulfill that.
Why do you think, though, that he didn't go back to then after the meeting? I know you can't get in his head, but he didn't go back to tougher talk about Putin, because he was getting to be like, Putin's the problem and I'm going to actually start harming Putin in some way, economic sanctions or more support Ukraine or something. And then since the meeting, he's been back to how he was on the campaign trail, which is Putin's great and he definitely wants peace. It's just and he just posted before the Zelensky meeting, Zelensky is the one who needs to end the war. If he was off put by that interaction, do you have any sense of the positivity coming back and what that's about?
I don't think he's going to be positive about Putin. Again, I think that he's just done with the entire situation. I think that he thought that he could negotiate with him. He can't. But I think deep down, he still likes him. He still believes in the flattery and the KGB flattery that Putin puts out against him all the time. And so he's just kind of being wishy-washy with the whole thing. This is one of the most complex situations I think I've ever tried to analyze when it comes to geopolitics. Every single day, there seems to be a different statement and a different wind direction with Donald Trump and with his relationship with Russia. He, yes, is getting more and more and more exhausted with it, that he can't get whatever he wants, but he doesn't really understand what Ukraine is, what the fight is about, what the significance of the Donbas is, and what any of these places really are. And that's why today at the White House briefing, at the White House conference, there was a map of the Donbas. There was a map showing the percentages that was right on the wall. And that's why Zelensky brings pictures and photos and maps with him whenever he Trump, because he's like, this is what this is, because Zelensky knows that Trump doesn't know what is actually going on. So I don't think Trump is really going to change his rhetoric that much more from Putin. I think he's just going to get more and more tired of him, but he's not going to go against him. He's not going to sanction him. There could be a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of, talk about blackmail, things like this. We don't really know what it is, but I don't think he will ever actually go against Putin. I think he'll just be exhausted by him. And that's as far as the extent.
Yeah, and you're right that he could both be simultaneously feeling exhaustion, maybe discontent towards Putin, but also the first thing he was talking about in his post-summit interview was how Putin told him the election was stolen from him in 2020, about how Putin said, Trump, you're so correct, that if you had been president, this never would have started. And so just that amount of flattery in the meeting and the you're strong and all of that may be, as depressing as this sounds, enough for him to go back to not being as stark in his language. You mentioned the Donbas. Explain to people, explain it to Trump, the significance.
The Donbas is a huge area of Ukraine. It's between Florida and Boston, if you looked at it on a map. And it is rich in minerals, in lithium, in salt mines, in ways that matter all across Europe and its exports. And it's a place where hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians have spent years fighting for. And it's a place that Russia has tried to take for a huge amount of time. And also, if you look all the way down the leg of the Donbas, down towards Mariupol, and then all the way to Kherson, this cuts off Ukraine from most of the Black Sea. It's incredibly strategic. And it's a homeland. It's a place where generations of Ukrainians have lived, where their family members are buried, where they went to school, where they went to hospital, where they lived their lives. It's a significant part of Ukrainian life and culture, and it's a very hard place to visualize because it's not right on a coastline, or it's not somewhere that's very, very famous, but it's somewhere that's being fiercely defended every single day. And the reason that Putin wants it is because it's full of rail lines as well. Places like Pokrovsk, this is a city that's being fought over right now, right in the middle of the Donbas. And Russia rages their war by rail. They bring, because it's a Soviet old school type of war, they bring all their tanks in by rail, they bring all their weaponry and artillery in by rail. And as soon as they try and take those towns and those cities that are rail cities and industrial cities, they won't just steal all the resources, but they'll ship in all their armory and all their equipment into the Donbas, and then they'll reamass towards Kyiv and Dnipro again. So it would be devastating for Ukraine for them to take this land. It's also literally independent Ukrainian land. And there's been so much propaganda put out about the Donbas. There's the Donetsk People's Republic, which in 2014, when Crimea was annexed, this was set up, which was basically a fake campaign by the Russians to pay Russian soldiers to pretend to be Ukrainians that wanted their own independence. And this has been going on for years now. And if you ever visit the Donbas, you'll start to kind of see a lot of this context and see a lot of people talking about this. But it's a deeply Ukrainian place, tied deeply in Ukrainian culture. But it's significant to Russia, and Russia knows if they take it, they can seriously harm Ukraine, and they can cut off Ukraine from a lot of its own resources. And it would be devastating for it to be lost. But
yeah.
And Trump doesn't really know what it is, what it looks like. You could show him a photo of the biggest town in the Donbass, he wouldn't recognize it. And it's really hard to have these conversations unless you know what it is. But again, the entire summit was a waste of time, because any relationships that are positive with Russia end up being a waste. The last time we had this was in 2009. It was called the Big Reset. It was Hillary Clinton holding a big red button, and she hit this big button standing next to Sergei Lavrov, and she said, we want to get rid of the old days of the Cold War. We want to put all that stuff behind us. We're bored of that now. We want to start again. We want to renew our relationship with Russia. And this is the last time that America tried to have a positive relationship with Russia. And look what happened next. Crimea was stolen in 2014. Donetsk People's Republic was set up. The Nord Stream pipeline was set up. And basically a hybrid war was set up between Russia and the rest of Europe and the United States. So negotiating with Russia and having a relationship with Russia only ends in chaos and destruction. And we've seen this time and time and time again. So that whole conversation should just be written off entirely. But yeah, I've spent so much time in the Donbass, and there's a lot of misinformation right now by MAGA Republicans saying, well, they speak Russian in the Donbass, so it must be Russian. Well, I come from Ireland, and they speak English in Ireland because of English colonialism. So I guess that means Britain should take back Ireland. This is the exact same logic. Just because of Russian colonialism doesn't mean that any of those people want to be part of Russia. And every single soldier I have ever interviewed in the Donbass tells me, whenever I ask why they're fighting, we're fighting to get Russians out of our country. And so it's very, very, very important, very ideologically important, and important to Ukrainians.
Wow. Well said. Moving forward then, from the summit to Zelensky's meeting in the Oval Office, he showed up, he had his, like a suit-ish on, and that became, you sent out a tweet about if your focus is about the attire of Zelensky instead of the mass slaughtering by Putin, something's deeply wrong with your moral compass. And I was struck by that, watching all of the goings on of this event that I know the meetings are still happening, and just how much Zelensky's having to do on something that's utterly irrelevant to the stuff that matters, to placate Trump and to win back over Vance. And it's important that he gets them in his good graces for obvious reasons, but it's so humiliating to see our president force that to be even a focus. So he shows up. His first thing in the office is saying thank you a bunch of times to make sure Vance doesn't get onto him about that. And what was your observation of that meeting that just took place and sort of how Zelensky was managing it?
Well, Zelensky has realized strategically that the only way to do anything with the United States now is to placate Trump's ego. That's the only way to do it. There is literally no point in discussing logic and facts or statistics with him. It's just placating his ego, which is why he wore a semi-suit. It's not actually an official suit. And I remember I follow the designer of that suit on Instagram, actually. He's a really cool Ukrainian designer. And his ambition of designing that suit was basically to say he still honors the defenders of Ukraine and how they don't wear suits. He still feels attached to them. But it's also a link to formalities with 4 different pockets. And it's all very interesting. Fashion at a time of diplomacy is historically a very, very interesting thing. And Zelensky's been pulling that very, very well. But what's most interesting is that there wasn't a single complaint about Sergei Lavrov wearing a USSR t-shirt at the summit in Alaska, which is a huge insult to America and a huge insult to America. So the same people that said, why aren't you wearing a suit? You're disrespecting us all, are absolutely overjoyed at the convoy from Russia coming in, wearing the stuff that America feared during the Cold War. So this is morally bankrupt. If you care even a second about what Zelensky's wearing, you're morally bankrupt. If you care in any way about what's happening with any of this, you'll look at the basically attempted extinction of Ukrainian culture that is happening every single day. The missiles that are going into Ukraine every single day, not what Zelensky's wearing. And the people that are going on about this, honestly, are reprehensible. They're the worst people on X. And
that's saying a lot.
Yeah, I mean, for God's sake.
Absolutely. What do you think when Putin's sitting there, or excuse me, whenever Zelensky's sitting there with Trump and is managing the situation as he is, and he's saying, just like Trump, he's strong about this, we want peace, we want to get a deal. They're meeting right now about that. What do you think he's hoping to get out of Trump? Because he's not going to get, all right, I understand, we can't really negotiate with Putin. We just need to lean into putting as much pressure as possible until Putin just fails. He has to just fail for this ever to come to a lasting peace. What do you think in a moment where he can't just say that because he'll be accused of being a warmonger and you want the war to go on from people who don't understand what's happening? What's the best, not concession, but achievement he could get out of meetings like this?
Well, just the best he possibly can in terms of resources. I mean, America is still willing to send a lot of aid to Ukraine and to morally support Ukraine as well. And as much help as possible that Ukraine can get, they're willing to accept, even if it means they're going to, take the knee and bend over backwards. And I think that's basically what Zelensky's doing right now. He's saying, we just want this sort of bare minimum of what we can possibly do by placating Trump, whether that's having shipments of weapons, whether that's still continuing a small amount of aid, or whether that's just not letting America maybe think of the idea of lifting sanctions on Russia or supporting Russia in any way militarily. We're willing to go through that process just to get the minimum that we possibly can. I think that's basically what it's about. It's about trying to convince Trump not to help Russia, trying to convince Trump to help Ukraine as much as possible. It's really, really simple. I don't think much will come out of it. I think it's nice to see it as a less hostile meeting as it has been in the past. But I don't think Trump is interested in helping Ukraine. I don't think Trump is actually interested in helping Russia at this point as well. I think Trump is just like, I am bored of this. This is not something I want to deal with anymore. And I think he wants to try and walk away from it. I mean, if we look at some of the logs from the meetings that the Wall Street Journal reported a couple of days ago, Trump was talking about how he almost walked out on Putin because Putin said he wants the entirety of the Donbas and isn't willing to budge for a second. And Trump said, well, if that's your position, this meeting is over. And apparently Putin pulled back slightly and said, okay, well, I'm willing to maybe make some concessions. But it seems like he's basically fed up with both, with everything. And I think Zelensky just basically wants the minimum from America, which is just its vocal support, maybe some weapons sent over, and to not lift sanctions on Russia, which would still help Ukraine. Ukraine needs all the help it can possibly get right now, and I think that's why Zelensky's doing this kind of diplomacy, and he's doing it, and he's very, very smart at it. It's as important as frontline strategy.
Well, Caolan Robertson, based in Ukraine, journalist, doing incredible work. You can support his channel by going to Caolan Reports on YouTube and X or Twitter. Caolan, thank you as always, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. It's been great.